Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Pep Talk. So today we actually have a different type of episode. We have a meeting with a fellow student at Pepperdine, and we're going to be discussing Pepperdine's COVID policies along with a lot of other details. So if you're interested, please watch, and if not, I'll see you all next week. Okay, well, welcome to Pep Talk. So today I'm here with Mason. I'll let him introduce himself today.
So I'm a senior at Pepperdine, econ major, and because I spent 2 years at junior college and transferred, this is my first year at Pepperdine, so I'm kind of figuring out what the college experience is like here.
Sure, yeah, this COVID experience has been something pretty unique, hasn't it?
I did not expect the experience I had, and spending the year online is like unprecedented. It's weird to talk with my parents and like in all their life they've never had to deal with anything like this, so it's definitely a unique experience.
Yeah, it's not something I feel like anyone has ever been through, and I don't know, the whole Zoom experience has been fairly different and unique for everybody, and
not necessarily in a good way.
Right, not necessarily in a good way, not for everyone at least, and not even that, but just how we've come back to campus. There are after effects of COVID-19 and the effects of people's thoughts on it. It's all very interesting, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of the change that we're experiencing as students is not due necessarily to COVID. It's more due to the reaction, which is kind of unfortunate. It feels very, in that sense, it's unfortunate in that it doesn't have to be the way it is.
Right.
And yet it is.
Sure. Yeah, so really I kind of wanted to ask you first off, so how do you feel that Pepperdine is dealing with COVID? Because there are a lot of universities that are dealing with it in different ways. We were shut down for an entire year.
Right.
Not particularly because Pepperdine wanted to, it's more because of the LA mandate.
Right.
But how do you think Pepperdine itself is responding to COVID?
Right. Yeah, it's tricky because I get that I don't have responsibilities that Pepperdine does, and so there are certain things that I am more staunch than I would expect Pepperdine to be. But at the same time, I feel that I don't buy the line that Pepperdine is doing this because of the LA mandates. There's a couple of aspects to that. One, you can still have an official policy that corresponds to LA, but they're not the county. They're not sending health officials here to make sure we're enforcing the masks rigidly. Pepperdine is doing that of their own free will. So to a certain extent, Pepperdine is going above and beyond what they need to. And then also there are certain things that even in terms of pure policy, I don't like the fact that Pepperdine is only acquiescing to the LA Health Board. I think that there should be, not on every issue, I don't know exactly, I haven't thought out what is the hill to die on, but at least with regards to certain things, I think that there should be a pushback. Pepperdine has a lot of money. Mm-hmm. If they want to, they could tell the LA Health Board to fizz off.
Right. Sure.
And so in that sense, they could just say like, we'll acquiesce with you on some things, but on this we won't. Take for instance the mandatory quarantine. If you're even exposed, you're purely asymptomatic, but if you haven't been vaccinated, you have to go quarantine for 10 days. Mm-hmm. I have a friend he went home, but the another person who's unvaccinated that was exposed to COVID-19 went off to live in the trailers for a little bit, and it was so miserable she went to go spend the rest of her quarantine at his parents' place. Mm-hmm. And something like that, where it just, that seems to me to be a little bit crazy to say you don't have any symptoms and you're not even diagnosed with COVID, you're just exposed to someone, and because you're unvaccinated, you need to go live in this trailer.
Right.
And you can't even go to the cafeteria. Like, we will literally bring you your food. You're just going to be in this box for 10 days. You know.
So do you think that Pepperdine's doing too much and with the whole regard to COVID?
Definitely. And again, I realize they have responsibilities to other people besides conservatives, and so it's not to say that they need to on every issue be right down the line where I would line up, but they're just, I think that Pepperdine is really uniquely situated in that they have a lot of money, and I think that obviously you need to be wise in how you allocate even a large budget. But Pepperdine is unique in that it has the resources to be an advocate of change and resistance to the government. And I think that they're abdicating a very unique opportunity that they have in that. Again, like take us. I think that this isn't to excuse laziness, and I think that in whatever capacity you should be willing to sacrifice certain things. But for many students who disagree with this policy, there's no way pragmatically for us to push back on the LA Health Board. Like, what are we going to do? Whereas Pepperdine has a type of bully pulpit at least, and they could use that. And just it seems like on every single issue, Pepperdine is going to go along to get along, never offer any pushback, never be a voice of reason. And for me, I think that even if there are going to be monetary sacrifices that need to be made, like if we're gonna do something that's worthwhile here at Pepperdine and start to regain the culture, Pepperdine's a Christian university, so that should be part of what they're invested in. I think we need to, or Pepperdine needs to be able to put some financial winnings on the line, and thus far there's not been any of that. In fact, when the LA vaccine mandates came, that's another thing where I thought maybe Pepperdine will push back. And they haven't. You need now to even go to an outdoor event with 1,000 or more people, I believe. You either need to be vaccinated or you need to have a recent diagnosis. A recent COVID test that's negative.
Right.
And that's just again another missed opportunity where Pepperdine could really say, we're not going to do this, and I really don't think the LA Health Board would come after them. But even if they did, it would be a unique opportunity for Pepperdine to start to be a voice of change for Kiva.
Sure, absolutely. So let me ask you a bit more of a specific question.
Sure.
So what do you think about the weekly testing that's required by Pepperdine?
Yeah. So there's sort of the issue of, is it a good idea on an objective level, and then is it a good idea for Pepperdine to enforce? So that might not be the hill to die on for Pepperdine. It's honestly a relatively minor thing. It's not an inconvenience. You just walk up and schedule the event and spit into a tube. Again, as far as is it necessary on a pure objective level, I think that's kind of silly. In my opinion, it's very silly. We have 86.5% of all faculty and teachers vaccinated. The other, 14-ish percent, they're not vaccinated because they're choosing to. So, like, if there is any risk to them, I assume that they're willing to bear that risk. And the idea that you need to protect vaccinated people, again, that's generally not true. It's again, there's the issue of it's hypothetically possible, but statistically very rare that you're vaccinated and you'll get seriously sick from COVID. So the idea that Pepperdine needs to, for the sake of its populace, enforce this, I don't see that at all.
Sure. Yeah, I'd like to kind of go off on that. So, well, for one, I don't understand the whole process with the spitting. I don't know why we have to do that. I feel like it's kind of gross, and it's
it is
right.
Yeah,
and it's difficult to do honestly sometimes because it doesn't go through the tube and
right. Well, and I made the mistake that I didn't drink any water my first time before going, so I get up there and I realize, oh, my mouth is drier than track dust, and what do I do now?
Sure, exactly. But more importantly, I don't understand what the use of it really is, because let's say if you were going to go and take it on Monday, right? You have to take one once a week, and it doesn't matter what point of the week you get it, as long as it's once. So if you were to go, take the test on Monday and you're negative, right? But then let's say that night you go to a party and then get COVID.
Right.
But it says you're negative for that week, so it's okay. But meanwhile, you're actually spreading COVID throughout the entire week. Right. So for me, the testing doesn't really make much sense.
Yeah, it's symbolic. I mean, maybe there can be disagreement on this, but in my opinion, it's kind of like the mask. Masks are not in every scenario, but for all intents and purposes, they're symbolic. And I think you see this in that, like, where if you're at the library, and someone will walk over to, if you're by yourself, and someone will walk over to you and tell you to put on the mask, they've increased the likelihood of transmission because they've come over to you, they've engaged in close contact with you, to tell you to put on the mask. And in that sense, it's like, is it really about reducing transmission, or is it about having the appearance that we care? Right.
And kind of to go off on that, I think that it doesn't really make sense regarding the masking and the testing. I think I agree with you on that. It's more of a symbol than it is actually practically being a thing.
And well, let me just say this too, that like my mask, I got I got it specifically because it's very breathable. I blow out a buddy's lighter through the mask.
Sure.
And it's one of those things where Pepperdine, they don't differentiate based on how the mask actually works. As long as it has a certain look to it, just something over your face, they're okay with it. It's not Pepperdine, but I think it's kind of a related story. We went to go see a movie. I can't remember what movie it was. But anyways, we go, and my brother, he has a buff. And because the buff is like, it looks more like a construction thing and not like an actual mask, he was told he couldn't wear that and he had to wear the surgical mask. But I go in with my mask, which is way more breathable because it has this certain shape to it.
Right.
It's totally acceptable. And
Sure.
you kind of see the same thing where it's more about appearances than actually reducing transmission.
Right. And it also, like you were saying, the different masks do matter. Most people on campus I see are wearing either the surgical masks
Right.
or, the typical cloth masks.
Right. And neither of those are particularly effective. If you
No.
want to be effective, it's an N95 or
Right.
K95. Right.
So, and I want to talk a little bit about this because a lot of the teachers that I see that actually, are worried about COVID, which they shouldn't be, which we'll talk
Right.
about here in a second, but they wear KN95s, which makes sense. But most of the student population and most people on campus at all wear these masks that really don't protect you from getting COVID. All they do is protect others from getting spit on, essentially.
Right.
And
Which
even
again,
then, not really.
right. And I feel like there are other ways to do that. Like if you're going to sneeze into your elbow.
Right.
Again, it just seems that it's a lot of regulation for things that could be handled with common decency.
Sure.
And the problem is that you're making students out to be violators of Pepperdine's official guidelines for doing things that really don't make a difference in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. And okay, so there's 2 points I want to kind of note there. The first of which is that for the people that are scared on campus, right, as you were saying earlier, it doesn't really make sense for them to be scared because, for one, everyone that's on campus is required to be vaccinated unless, there are certain exemptions. You were
Right.
saying. But even then, like you said, I think you said like 14% or less than that
Are unvaccinated.
are unvaccinated. So that's a significant minority. But even then, it doesn't matter, right? Because if you are vaccinated and you yourself are protected,
Right.
the rate of hospitalization, it goes down by 90%, and the transmission rate goes down by 80 or 90% as well. So if you have the vaccine,
Right.
the worst that would happen to you if you were to somehow contract COVID would be having a day or two like of cold symptoms.
Right. Well, and furthermore, like Pepperdine, it's a college, so
Right.
it's mostly, aside from the teachers, it's mostly people that aren't at high risk anyways. I don't remember exactly the mortality rates or the case fatality rates I was looking up last night, but for people in the 18 to 49 demographic, it's like 0.0778% case fatality rate pre-vaccination.
Right.
And it's just interesting that I think Pepperdine is seemingly more concerned about COVID than maybe your average population, which is probably older than the people that are on campus for the most part.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting. And I've heard a couple of stories of people. I've had experiences myself where I will be in the library taking a drink of water and people will come at me and say, you need to put on your mask. And it's like, how effective do you really find that to be? It's like you were saying, I think it's much more of a symbolization
Right.
rather than it is, actually preventing the spread of the disease.
Right. So if I can share another story, I
Go
was with my roommate, and not just suite mate, but actual roommate, and we were studying together. I have my mask down, and someone comes in this study room. It's not even out in the library. It's in one of the study rooms,
Right.
closed off.
It's isolated.
Exactly. And she comes in and says, "I have to wear the mask." And I say, "Well, he's my roommate. Do I really have to do this?" And she said, "Yes, because like the room isn't well ventilated, so maybe if I have my mask down, I'll breathe out, and it'll just kind of COVID will hang around until someone comes in." But still, which I mean, there's in a strict philosophical sense that might be true, but from a statistical sense, which I think is more important to making decisions, like that's just not likely going to happen at all. And it's like even to the point where you can't, like, literally, I'm going to go home and share a room with this guy for 12 hours, but I have to wear the mask in that scenario when it's a closed off room. That just seems like it's way overkill.
Yeah, I would say that the people that are especially acting as the mask police on campus, right? Or even the people that are afraid of COVID, not even just on campus, but in general, the people that are generally afraid of it are the vaccinated, not the unvaccinated.
And at least in my experience, the people that will tell you to wear the mask are oftentimes younger too.
Right.
Well, have you? I'm sure you've heard of the What is it? The Health Ambassador program Pepperdine has?
I believe so, yes.
Right. So yeah, you just Google Pepperdine Health Ambassador, and that's where you can sign up to be on part of the mask police for 18 an hour. And,
really? Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So if you're ever in need of a job, I guess you could do that.
Sure.
But basically you're hired to mosely go around the Payson Library and tell people to wear the mask.
Okay, so I think there's something that needs to be noted here. So the reason that I am kind of an anti-mask mandate guy is not because I'm, anti the science, or I'm, conservative in the sense that I don't want someone enforcing that I wear a mask. Like I'm okay with that as long as it makes sense. But from a logical standpoint, the fact that the university requires everyone to be vaccinated, the fact that we're being tested weekly, doesn't make sense that we should be wearing masks. It literally doesn't make sense. And people will argue, well, if we don't wear masks, there might be a spread of COVID. Well, we've said that everyone's vaccinated, so the transmission rates are already down significantly.
Right.
And the people that get COVID are those that are unvaccinated due to religious exemptions or whatever. Mm-hmm. And as you were saying, it's kind of on them for being sick.
Right.
And
their
I think, decision.
Right. And to kind of bring it back to what the lady said when I had to wear the mask, even though I was just with my roommate in this closed off space, the idea that COVID might spread is true. I'm not going to deny that. But there's a certain point to where I think we should say, well, yeah, it might, but is it really worth telling people, what they can and cannot do in ways that are, frankly, it is to a certain extent a big deal. Not that it's painful or anything. So it depends what you mean by a big deal, but a big part of what it means to, I think, interact with people is to see facial expressions and things like that, which you don't get with the mask. And we're taking a lot of dramatic steps that, again, in most of American and even human history, it doesn't seem like we've done this. And so we're taking a lot of dramatic steps to reduce a risk that is real but statistically negligible.
Right. And something that's particularly interesting to me that I found honestly just quite infuriating is that a lot of my teachers, particularly mine, have told my class or our classes that if you don't wear the masks, if you don't comply, then there could be a possible surge or outbreak, which could result in Pepperdine going back to virtual. And I am sitting here just thinking, like, how is that possible if the rest of the country, basically all the other universities throughout the country, have been back to normal for the past year and a half? Like they're not wearing masks, they're going completely normal, and they've been fine. But if we don't, we're going to go back to shutdown. And I'm just curious, like, why? Like, why is it us in particular to have to abide by these certain rules, while these other bigger, larger universities, people who aren't vaccinated, don't have to? It doesn't make sense. They're not having any problems, so why would we? And it just doesn't make sense to me. And like I was saying earlier, if you yourself are vaccinated, even if you're an elderly professor, that's particularly in the riskier age group, if you are vaccinated, along with the booster shots that are coming out now, there is literally basically no threat to you at all of getting COVID. So it just doesn't make sense. And going back again to the type of masks people are wearing, with the surgical masks and cloth masks that don't actually really prevent much of acquiring COVID or even the spread of it. They only stop you from spitting, and that's even if they're properly worn, which they usually aren't most of the time. And a lot of the times that people are telling you to wear your mask are simply to walk through the hallways, right? I've heard stories of freshmen in their residential dorms having to wear it to go to the bathroom, which just doesn't make sense, right?
That's Pepperdine's policy.
It doesn't make sense to me. I would need someone to explain to me why I would have to put on a mask to leave my dorm room, to go to the bathroom, to go back. It doesn't make sense.
The problem is that I think with a lot of people, in my experience, the mindset is anything that reduces the spread of COVID is worthwhile. And to me, that's just not the case. There are so many things that I think, because the focus is on the COVID, that there are other risks that we take in life that are perfectly normal. And I think a lot of people don't think of those things as risks just because they're part of the air they breathe. But to a certain extent, we all take risks as human beings, and things that reduce that, it's not necessarily a good if it infringes on people's liberties or how people would normally live their lives. So the standard is, in my opinion, the standard shouldn't be we're taking action which would reduce COVID risk if it doesn't have a significant impact, and B, it does significantly infringe on people's rights.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with most of those points. I also want to talk to you on a similar subject, how you think, I don't know, how the LA's kind of mandates have been going. So I'm not sure if you've been keeping up with them or not. But recently, like, as you said, we
No,
had
I'm
the
curious
vaccine.
because I'm unaware of this. Is it LA City or LA County?
It's LA County.
Okay.
So yeah, LA County just recently passed one of the strictest nationwide vaccine mandates
Right.
ever. And so I was just curious, what do you think about stuff like that?
Yeah, it's interesting because as opposed as I am to the restriction itself, I honestly don't think that LA is going to enforce it. So pragmatically, I don't know that this is a big deal. But in terms of the idea that politicians, like the fact that we live in a country where politicians could pass this and still have job security is a testament to, I think, how wrong-headed many of the citizenry is, which is sad. And I'm not hating on anyone. I just think that people are misled. But yeah, so it's not the law itself or the order itself that I'm particularly frustrated over, because again, I don't know how much of a day-to-day impact it'll have. I really can't imagine LA having the guts to enforce this hard. But the fact that politicians think they can get away with passing something like that, that's the bigger issue to me.
I agree. Well, I don't think I have too many other questions for you. Would you have anything else you want to say regarding Pepperdine and how they've dealt with COVID, or what you would want them to do instead, or how to move forward from this, possibly for next semester or next year even?
Right. Yeah. That's a really good question, and it's something that I've been thinking a little bit about, like what exactly concretely are some of the measures that we should take. I think there are two things that I've been able to sort out for now. One is, even if we in theory adhere to all of LA's mandates, again, a lot of the excuses I'm hearing from Pepperdine or for why we're doing this is, well, the LA County is making us do this, which means that in the day-to-day lives, you don't need teachers and students for $18 or for $18 an hour for students, to enforce the mask like that. LA's not making us do that. Two is on some of the more radical stuff, like maybe not testing, but like if you're exposed to COVID, even if you're asymptomatic and haven't even necessarily tested positive yet, that you need to go quarantine. Something like that would be a clear issue to me, to where Pepperdine would say, no, we're not going to enforce that at all.
Is there any specific things you would want Pepperdine to do in the future, or maybe things to get rid of?
Well, that one in particular, and I think that would be a sort of a testing the waters point to see, because again, I think we do need to be strategic in how we fight our battles, and when you're dealing with the LA Health Board, LA is a county that has a lot of tax resources to fight you if they want. So I think pushing back on the most radical elements first and seeing where we can go from there would be a good idea.
Sure, I agree. And I think just before we kind of finish it off here, I want to conclude that the whole reason that we're having this discussion, or we're talking about some of the problems that we have with the COVID policies, I think I can say for both of us, is not because we're conservative or Republican or anything like that, but more so the fact that they just don't simply make sense. Right.
Well, I think it's a hand in hand. I think obviously more conservatives than liberals are having a problem with, although I've talked to some liberals who do, they're few and far between. But no, I think you're right. Ultimately, it's not even because it's a party line thing. Unfortunately, it's sort of becoming that.
Right.
But in my opinion, it doesn't have to be.
Right.
I would never appeal to a political stance. I would try to appeal to a theory of rights to back up what I'm saying, and empirical data.
Right, exactly. Which is what leads me back to my point in saying that if you have the vaccine, if you are worried about getting COVID, particularly older professors, which we do have a lot of, right? So it makes sense for them to be worried to a certain degree. But if they are worried, they themselves could be vaccinated, which they most likely are, and they could get the booster shots, which again reduces their hospitalization rate,
and they can wear
by
N95.
90%.
Yeah, and you can wear an N95.
And they mostly wear KN95 masks, which protects them. Also, everyone is required to be vaccinated, and as you said, there is only very minute amount of people that aren't. So they're the only ones that are at threat. So it wouldn't make sense for any of the vaccinated people to be afraid of it, especially with how many people are vaccinated on campus. That's why I think you are both kind of against these people policing mask mandates on campus, and possibly even the weekly testing. It just doesn't make sense when other universities throughout the country haven't been doing these things for over a year, and they're doing it just fine. Right,
and the problem is not just that I personally don't like testing. That's a part of it. I can't deny, but it's largely relevant to the broader concern, which is if you don't go along with this and you you're brought up before I forget what organization, but I think it's Student Office of Accountability or something like that. If you're brought before them and you refuse to participate, you will be kicked out of the school. So again, it's not just that like I don't like doing this, but in that like you're seriously going to kick people out of school for doing things that don't pragmatically make us on a statistically measurable level any safer. You know?
Yeah, I would have to agree. Well, I don't think I have any other questions for you. I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank y'all for watching this episode.
Sure.
It's been an interesting conversation to hear what other students have to say about, COVID policies, and just to discuss what possible future options we have. So if there's any concluding comments you have,
No, that's it.
All right. Well, with that being said, thank you for coming on.
For sure.
And I will see you all next week on the next episode of Press Not.